Hello, I am Tanya Rai, former mentee of the award-winning mentoring programme delivered by Rise, and I'm also a member of their advisory board. In today's episode of Rise's In Conversation with webinar series, I am joined by Seema Talwar, another fascinating and inspirational woman who set out to prove to her mum that as a British South Asian woman, she could make it. And she absolutely did make it. She joined 20th Century Fox on a temporary contract and stayed for 20 years. She sat on the board of directors, and her last role of Senior Vice President of International Operations saw her lead the change management process of integrating two of the biggest media organisations in the movie business when Disney acquired 20th Century Fox. We'll hear more about Seema's career, who and what her influences were in driving forward her successes, and she's going to share some valuable advice for women when it comes to climbing that career ladder. Seema, a very warm welcome to you even. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, Tanya?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm doing very well indeed. Let's crack on with the conversation because we've got a lot to get through. So could you begin by talking us through your career at 20th Century Fox and starting with the circumstances that led you to the temporary contract right through to when you left?
Okay, so I actually did a degree not in media. I did a degree in languages and business and IT, weirdly. And as I left university, a temporary role came up at 20th Century Fox. And I took it just to earn some money, pay back some of that student debt, and loved it and never looked back. So the temporary role was an admin role. I just keyed orders all day, every day. But I loved the culture, I loved the atmosphere, and the rest is history, as they say. At that time, 20th Century Fox I was in the division that was launching movies, and it was all VHS. And it was going through massive growth. We'd come out of, everything being rental in Blockbuster to suddenly movies being for sale. And I just loved it and never looked back. So that's how I started, very much by chance. It was a temp agency called me and said, "Hey, we've got this job for a week. Do you want to take it?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, that week turned out to be very many more weeks and months and years. And as you say, I moved into a permanent role probably after about 6 months, and I was determined to succeed. And I'll get into a bit of that later. And more recently, as you mentioned, Fox was acquired by the Walt Disney Company. I committed to see through that integration. My role as it was didn't exist in the new structure, but I committed to see through that integration. That's what I've done. So
amazing, that's brilliant. And actually just the fact that you didn't even look for it, it was just it came to you, and you've been able to form such a fantastic career off the back of it. That's brilliant.
Absolutely, things happen as they're meant to.
I'm a firm believer in that. Absolutely. So what was your most favourite period during your time at 20th Century Fox?
I think I worked in the area of supply chain and operations, logistics and manufacturing and procurement. And when I'd started, it was almost a back office. It was a back office service. And I think what I loved about what I did was getting operations a seat at the table, making sure we had a voice. And I did that, and therefore was recognised as the first operations director in the 20th Century Fox organization. And they rolled that structure out then to all the subsidiary markets. I worked for the UK office at that time, and we had offices around the world, and they rolled that structure out to give operations that voice. And that was a moment of pride, because I felt, okay, we've now got a seat at the table and are valuable in what we input. And I was 29 when I was made operations director, so quite daunting.
Wow.
But yeah, that was probably my proudest moment. Lots of lovely moments along the way, but if I had to call out one.
Well, especially at that age as well, under the age of 30, and to have secured such a senior position, and you mentioned there it was a little bit daunting, but I mean, how did you kind of manage that, that feeling of it being daunting and just being able to get on with it?
I was daunted, of course I was, but I think I learned quite early on that if you lead with passion and authenticity, then everything else falls into place. And that's what I did. It's what my dad had taught me when I was younger, and that's what I did. I stayed authentic and kept that in my core values, and the rest just happened. So it didn't, yes, it was daunting when you thought about it, but as you actually went through it, it just happened. So I
Yeah,
think
well,
that's the main thing for me is authenticity and passion. I loved what I did,
and so
and
it
stayed
shone
true to
through.
myself.
Yeah, yeah. And what was it like, in terms of it being a male-dominated environment? I mean, I'm making that assumption it was a male-dominated environment. Am I right in thinking that?
It was to a certain extent, and you did get, you know, 20th Century Fox itself was very diverse, and my peers respected me and recognised what I brought to the table. And I had some great leaders who were men. I had great leaders who were women. But you did come across clients or suppliers who struggled with a young woman in that position of authority. And my view was that's their issue. And I just continued to, to be as authentic as I was and do my job. And ultimately, that's what shines through is, people recognizing your capability. But yes, it was in some, I mean, I remember being in meetings where this one particular supplier wouldn't look at me. I'd ask a question and he'd look at a male colleague and I had to call him on it. So it did happen, but that's old school now, I think, and hopefully not as prevalent.
God, I wonder how he reacted to you calling him out on it.
Yeah, he wasn't expecting that.
I bet. There was when I was on the mentee scheme for Rise, we had a series of women that came in and spoke to us, and one of them was a managing director of a post house, and she said that she just had to just keep talking in meetings, as in, people, men generally would, be talking over each other, and she had to adopt the same style in order to be heard. And I thought that's really interesting. But like you say, I think that's that's changing for sure, in these days and these times. Now we've already talked about one of your proudest moments, but I know that there are many, and there was one that we had spoken about, which I thought is such a lovely anecdote, and I'd like you to talk about it a little bit more. And it's the end of your tenure at 20th Century Fox. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. So, for me, one of the great things and what I love about what Rise do is mentoring people and helping people grow in their own journeys. And so watching my team grow was really important to me. Giving them the freedom to be the best that they could be was really, really important to me. And watching them flourish into great executives, great leaders, was brilliant. And as I finished my tenure, once the Disney acquisition had been closed, a parcel arrived at my door. And initially my husband was like, oh God, what have you been ordering now? Another parcel arrives. It was retail therapy during lockdown. And I was like, I'm sure I haven't ordered anything else. And anyway, I opened this parcel and my team, my UK team, who had left, most of them had left several months before me, had commissioned a hand painting of the iconic 20th Century Fox building where we had worked for my tenure at Fox. It's a beautiful old building. I don't know if you've seen it. It's in Soho Square with the 20th Century Fox sort of logo lit up at the top. And they commissioned a hand painting because that lease had been given up and we'd exited that building at lockdown. And it was never going to go, we were never going to go back to that building. And it meant a lot to us. And so that in itself choked me. But what was most important, or what was my proudest moment, was underneath that they had put a quote by Maya Angelou, which said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. I've learned that people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that made me really proud, primarily because when the acquisition was first talked about and when it went through in March 2019, I said to my leadership team, you know, our goal now is not to set strategy. Our goal is to get people through this acquisition whole and complete and positive, and hand over professionally and authentically. And that proved to me we'd done that. And therefore, I think that was my single proudest moment, was feeling that I'd got the team through that. So yes, that painting has got a pride of place in my house.
I'm sure it has. What a beautiful and thoughtful gift to have given you, and actually just testament to what you did and how you managed it all. I think it's amazing. So the next question I have for you is working in the movie business, did you ever get the opportunity to meet actors? And if so, are there any favourite memories and anyone that you were starstruck by?
We did. I mean, not all the time. Obviously, you weren't mingling with the stars every day, but we had 2 cinemas in our building downstairs, which were used for, you know, Jonathan Ross used them for his film series, watching previews of films. They were used for BAFTA screenings. So there were a lot of people, and pre-screenings. So there were a lot of people coming in and out. So you would often bump into people at reception or whatever. We had Sean Connery work in our building for about 6 months on one of the films that he did. Now, we had to be obviously professional, and we weren't, you know, no one was disturbing him, whatever, but you would see him, and he was always very polite and a real gentleman. And then my favourite moment has to be the world premiere of Braveheart, the film Braveheart with Mel Gibson. So the premiere was at Stirling Castle up in Scotland.
Oh, wow.
And it was stunning. And as they were showing the film, at that time it wasn't digital, it was on tape, and the tape snapped. So while the technicians were switching tapes over, Mel Gibson got up in front of the audience and started Scottish dancing, which was great. And then at the after party, it was in the castle, and everyone was doing this sort of country dancing where you switch partners across the room. And we were doing that, and suddenly I thought, oh my God, I'm dancing with Mel Gibson. And I was, you know, 20 something, and I was just completely starstruck at that point, because I was, you know, as I'd switched partners, I recognized that he was my new partner. So that was, yeah, probably my most exciting encounter with a famous person.
Oh, that's brilliant, and a lasting memory that you've got there as well. Oh, God, that sounds so exciting too. You know, Stirling Castle in Scotland and a grand premiere.
Now, don't get me wrong, it was hard work, but we had some great times along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Let's talk about your mum now. And this is going to be a fascinating part of the conversation, because as a fellow British South Asian woman, I know what Indian mums are like. And they are both very loving, yet very provocative as well. Not all, but some. And I mentioned in the introduction that you were determined to prove to her that you could make it. Why was that?
Okay, so let me give you a bit of background first. My mum and dad came here in the early 60s, or my dad came here in the early 60s to do his degree. And my mum joined him when they got married, and she was 24 years old, very young, and actually really modern. She had been an air hostess when she met my father, so she'd been traveling the world, which was unusual for Asian women in India at that time. And they settled here she came here in 1967. And I think what happened was, you know, they were on their own. There was no family. They were the early sort of settlers in the UK. So there was not the same culture around them and whatever. And what happened, I think, or what I believe happened, was as India progressed in their thought leadership and culture, she stayed stuck in what she remembered when she'd left at the age of 23 before she became an air hostess, and felt that she had to cling on to some of those values. And some of those values were outdated about women's role in society and the role we had to play. And it came to, and it transpired through my childhood. I have a brother, and I was very, you know, determined and yet they said to my brother, we'll send you to private education, but it's not worth it for a girl. You know, it's not worth investing in a female. So there were little things like that that showed that thought process in her. And then when I went to university, and I was able to go to university and do my undergraduate degree, and I graduated, I wanted to do a master's. And my mum's words were, "You'll be overqualified." And I said, "For what?" And she said, "For marriage. No man will want you if you are smarter than he is, more qualified than he is, and your role is as a homemaker." And at that point, I'd taken this temp job at 20th Century Fox, and I thought, I'm going to prove to her that a woman can make it. And I'm going to prove to her that an Asian woman can make it. And that was it. That was my driving force through my career, was I need to show that I can do this. I need to get rid of those limiting thoughts. Now, she progressed over time. And now she's the trendiest grandmother ever, and, you know, really open with my kids. But at that time, it was the catalyst I needed to make it. And now she tells me, "I did that to drive you. I did that to make you determined." I'm not sure if that's true, but whatever it was, it worked. So yeah, so I think, you know, that those words, "You'll be overqualified for marriage," were like a slap in the face. I was like, oh my God, I've got to do something to change this mindset.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from.
Gosh, I think it's, you can understand though from that generation, as you explained, you know, why that was the kind of thought process and why that was the case. But good for you for powering on through and you know, thinking that's not going to be for me, and you know, I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever it takes to get to the top, as it were.
Yeah, and she's and over the last, you know, decade or so, she's been amazingly supportive of and tells everyone how successful her daughter is, which is lovely. So it was my driving force. It is what spurred me into doing it, yeah, it worked. So
yeah, it did. And you were saying to me before that actually with your brother, whilst they advocated that he should go to private school, he actually didn't take up that opportunity, did he?
No, he said, I mean, his words were, he didn't want to. He loved the school he was at. And he said to them, you know, "I'll do the test and I'll fail it deliberately. I don't want to move school." And I was, you know, I was chomping at the bit to want to do that, to get that opportunity. So we were very different, and are very different, but, you know, both successful in our own way. So
Yeah, definitely. And you did get married, and you do have children now as well, don't you? So what I think would be really interesting, particularly maybe for the younger members of Rise, but also you know, for the members that do have children, it's always really great for them to hear the experiences of others who have been working in senior leadership roles and balancing motherhood and the demands of the job. So what was that like for you?
yeah, so I do. I have 3 beautiful children, 2 girls and a boy. And you know what? It's what becomes your normal. I mean, I went back to work when they were fairly young. I had the support of my parents, who were great, you know, great grandparents, a great childminder who was like an aunt to them, and an amazingly supportive husband. And they didn't know differently. So they grew up thinking that was normal. And they've grown up very differently to the way I did. And I never felt I missed out. It became about quality of our time together rather than quantity of time. It's making those moments count. So when we were together and enjoying that time. And I never felt I missed out. My childminder would record if there was a moment where they took a first step and I wasn't there. She'd always record it and show it to me. I knew they were loved, and I felt I got quality time with them. I chose not to take a traveling role initially when they were very young, because that was hard, and I took that slightly later when they grew up a little bit. And they're really well adjusted children. This is what they know, and it's interesting because my daughter, my eldest daughter, had to do a piece in English a year ago, and it was about the glass ceiling, does it really exist? And she talked about my career as if it was the most normal thing in the world, but also had a perception from her teenage view, which was, whilst the Asian society may have judged me for being a career woman, they've also judged my husband for being not being the man of the house as they see it, because he worked his business. He supported my career totally. He knew what it meant to me, and he worked his business around being around for the kids. So he was home based. He worked his hours around the children, and they never lost out. They never lost out on one of us being around. But he was also judged by Asian society for not being the man of the house, and she articulated that, which was really interesting to see. But you can do it. You do need support. You do need to believe you can do it, and you do need a supportive family. But I did it, and I don't feel that either of us have lost out. And my daughter's article certainly didn't demonstrate that she felt she'd lost out.
No, it doesn't. And how old is your daughter, by the way?
She's 17.
17. Wow. That's such a perceptive 17-year-old by the sounds of it, to have been able to kind of navigate the issues that were faced by you and your husband from the Asian society in particular. And it's such a shame that there was that view, and particularly with your husband, because that as you say, there's that kind of sense of patriarchy being challenged there, I guess, and that's wasn't something that could be understood. But I don't think that that's just in Asian culture either. I think generally speaking that can be the case too.
Yeah, but we were happy with it. It worked for us, and that's what mattered, right? And
Yeah.
I feel that it was really important to me to give my children a different view of what they could achieve, to
Yeah.
enable them to be the best they could be,
Yes.
and not apologize for it.
Yeah. And I think just to reiterate the point that you made earlier on, which I think is such a good one, it's quality over quantity. And I'm not really in a position to say anything like that because I'm not a mother myself. But when you said that, I just thought, actually, that's the kind of mindset that is really helpful and useful to share with women, so that it doesn't kind of pile that pressure on about lack of time. It's not that, it's the quality that you make around the time that you do create together, which I think is
and having things like FaceTime, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, they can always see you and ring you and ask you a question, and that makes a really big difference. So yeah, we've done a lot of FaceTime calls when I've been in Australia or wherever I've been.
Yeah, and that that's one of the greatest things about new technologies, isn't it? It's the ability to be able to stay connected in that way.
Yeah.
Right, well, let's get to the final question that I had for you, and that was, what one bit of career advice would you give to the younger members of Rise?
I think for me, there's probably a couple of bits. So one is believe in yourself first and foremost. No one else can, if you don't believe in yourself, then no one else can believe in you for you. That's got to come from within. It's been said a lot, and I talked about authenticity and passion, and it's been said a lot this year, and we've all heard it. If you can be anything, be kind, be yourself, because I think it's really hard. I've seen people struggle with trying to fit in and be someone they're not, and you can't keep that up forever. So be authentic and be yourself and believe in yourself. So I think those are the things for me that are the most important, and certainly been my values as I've gone through my career journey, and has been a recipe that's worked for me. You do see all sorts. In any business, you get politics. In any business, you get jealousy. And if you stay true to who you are, you can ride those storms and come out stronger. my dad had a saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And, you know, that's been and then hard work. You know, a good friend of mine once told me, as I was climbing the career ladder, that the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. So it does take hard work, but if you're passionate about it, it doesn't feel like hard work.
Yes. Yeah.
I hope that makes sense, but
Yeah, absolutely does. Absolutely does. And I think to add to that, it's that kind of having a sense of self-assuredness and confidence. And I know sometimes that comes with age, but if you can try and get a sense of that in your younger years, that's what I kind of always think back to when I, in my mid-20s, realising that actually I did have that lack of self-confidence. And as I've gotten older, that's increased, and that makes such a difference as well, doesn't it? In terms of believing in yourself, like you say.
yeah, absolutely. I remember when one of my first bosses, I was 22, whatever, told me I had to present in a room full of people. And I went, well, I'm not doing it, I'm quitting first. And he went, well, your notice is a month, this presentation's in 2 weeks, you're doing it. And that was his way of driving me on and making me confident and believe in myself. And I did it and have done it many times since then. But yeah, it does take people to believe in you, but you've got to believe in yourself first.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great advice. Thank you very much, Seema. It's been lovely talking to you. Really appreciate you agreeing to come on to our In Conversation with, and we'll hopefully be able to speak to you again soon.
All right. Thank you very much, Tanya. Stay safe during these challenging times, and we'll speak
Yes,
soon.
yes, will do.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.